Welcome back everyone to the channel where everyday pocket change can hide unbelievable secrets. And today's story is one that will completely change the way you look at a simple 1-cent coin, because we are diving deep into the astonishing legend of the 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1-cent coin, a coin with a face value of just a single penny yet rumored, discussed, and passionately debated among collectors for its potential worth soaring as high as $4.7 million, a jaw-dropping figure. That sounds impossible until you begin to understand how rare minting errors, mistakes, mint mark anomalies, and once-in-a-lifetime production accidents can transform an ordinary coin into a historic treasure. And as we begin this journey together, imagine holding a humble copper-colored coin in your hand, the kind you might ignore or toss into a jar, never suspecting that it could carry a value rivaling luxury homes and priceless artwork, because the world of coin collecting is not governed by face value but by rarity, demand, story, and above all, uniqueness. And the 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1-cent coin sits at the center of a fascinating storm of speculation, discovery, and numismatic fascination. The year 2008 itself was a turbulent time in American history, marked by financial uncertainty, rapid changes, and global economic stress, and interestingly, periods of high mint output combined with pressure to produce coins quickly have historically resulted in an increased number of minting errors, and this context is crucial to understanding why collectors pay such close attention to coins from this era, particularly those struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the D Mint mark, because, while millions of 1-cent coins were produced that year, only an incredibly tiny fraction display the extraordinary combination of errors and anomalies that could elevate a single specimen into the multi-million-dollar category. The Roosevelt Liberty design, traditionally associated with dimes, has long symbolized leadership, freedom, and resilience, and when such iconic imagery appears on a 1-cent planchet under unusual circumstances, it immediately raises red flags and excitement among numismatists, because a design mismatch or transitional error can be one of the most valuable mistakes a mint can make, especially if it escaped detection and entered circulation. One of the most discussed possibilities behind the staggering valuation of the 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1-cent coin is the concept of a wrong design strike, where a die intended for another denomination was mistakenly used on a 1-cent planchet, resulting in a coin that technically should not exist. And coins that should not exist are precisely what collectors dream of, because they represent a breakdown in the strict quality control systems of the United States Mint, and when such breakdowns occur, they create numismatic legends. Another possibility lies in the realm of off-metal errors, where a 1-cent coin is struck on a planchet meant for a different denomination or even a foreign coin, and if a 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1-cent were found struck on a silver or clad planchet rather than the standard copper-plated zinc, the intrinsic metal value combined with the rarity of the error could send its worth skyrocketing into previously unimaginable territory. Mint mark errors alone can dramatically increase a coin's value, and the Denver Mint mark is particularly significant because it indicates a specific production facility with its own machinery, dies, and quality control processes, meaning that any unique flaw originating there can often be traced, authenticated, and documented with precision, adding to the coin's desirability and historical importance. Some collectors speculate about doubled mint marks, repunched mint marks, or even missing mint marks combined with die characteristics unique to Denver production, and when these elements appear together on a single coin, they create a perfect storm of rarity that pushes values beyond standard price guides. Die errors play an enormous role in this narrative, especially doubled dies, where the design appears slightly duplicated due to misalignment during the die creation process, and if the portrait, lettering, or date on a 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1-cent displays strong, clear doubling visible to the naked eye, it immediately places the coin into an elite category sought after by advanced collectors willing to pay extraordinary sums. Even more intriguing are die cracks, die breaks, and retained cut errors, where the die physically deteriorates during striking, leaving dramatic raised lines, missing sections, or unusual textures on the coin's surface, and when these features intersect critical design elements like the face, date, or mint mark, the resulting coin becomes a one-of-a-kind artifact of minting chaos. Another layer of value comes from alignment errors, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes without a collar, or rotated dies, where the obverse and reverse are misaligned beyond standard tolerances. And while minor versions of these errors are relatively common, extreme examples combined with other rare traits can elevate a coin into legendary status. The idea of a multi-million-dollar 1-cent coin may sound exaggerated, but history shows us that when multiple rare errors converge on a single specimen, collectors enter bidding wars driven not just by money but by prestige, because owning such a coin means possessing a unique piece of American minting history that may never be replicated. Transitional errors are another powerful factor, especially when changes in metal composition, design elements, or production techniques overlap between years. And if a 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1 cent were struck using leftover materials or experimental dies, it would represent a transitional moment frozen in metal. Something collectors value immensely because it tells a story about change and experimentation within the mint. Condition also plays a massive role, because a coin displaying these extraordinary errors in pristine, uncirculated, or mint state condition becomes exponentially more valuable than a worn example. And professional grading services assign numerical grades that can push prices into the stratosphere when rarity and preservation align perfectly. Authentication is critical in these cases, because the higher the value, the more scrutiny a coin receives, and only coins verified by top grading agencies with detailed documentation and photographic evidence can achieve record-breaking prices, which is why rumors of a $4.7 million valuation are always tied to coins that are not only rare but impeccably preserved and unquestionably genuine. The psychology of collectors must also be considered because the numismatic market is driven as much by emotion and competition as by objective rarity. And when a coin becomes famous through stories, auction results, or online discussion, its perceived value can increase dramatically as collectors rush to secure a piece of history. The story element is especially powerful with error coins, because each mistake represents a human or mechanical failure within an institution designed for precision, and that contradiction fascinates people, turning a simple penny into a narrative artifact. The possibility that such a coin could still be hiding in circulation adds another layer of excitement, encouraging people to search through their change with renewed hope, because unlike ancient artifacts locked away in museums, modern era coins can still be found in everyday places, making the hunt accessible and thrilling. Economic factors also influence valuations, as periods of inflation and market instability often push investors toward tangible assets like rare coins, increasing demand and prices for top-tier specimens, and a legendary era coin with a compelling story becomes not just a collectible but a financial hedge and a status symbol. The 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1 cent coin, as discussed among collectors, embodies all these factors, combining the intrigue of a wrong design possibility, the allure of mint mark anomalies, the drama of die errors, and the dream of discovering extraordinary value in the most ordinary object. Even the smallest details, such as unusual coloration, surface texture, or weight deviations, can signal deeper anomalies that elevate a coin's importance. And experienced collectors know to examine every aspect carefully, because sometimes the most valuable clue is invisible to the untrained eye. As stories circulate of coins selling for astonishing sums, skepticism naturally arises, but skepticism is also part of the numismatic process, pushing researchers to verify, document, and understand each claim, and when a coin withstands that scrutiny, its legend grows stronger. The idea of a 1-cent coin worth millions challenges our assumptions about money and value, reminding us that worth is not inherent but assigned by human agreement, rarity, and desire, and in that sense, the 2008 D. Roosevelt Liberty 1 cent coin becomes a symbol of hidden potential, a reminder that extraordinary value can exist in unexpected places. A coin that many people would never give a second glance, yet under extraordinary circumstances could be connected to values reaching into the millions. And I'm talking about the mysterious and controversial story surrounding a 2015 1-cent Roosevelt Liberty coin, a piece that at face value is just a single cent, almost worthless in daily commerce, but in rare error scenarios has been rumored, speculated, and endlessly debated as a potential $7 million treasure. And whether you are a longtime coin collector, a casual enthusiast, or someone who simply enjoys unbelievable stories hidden in everyday objects, this journey into minting errors, mistakes, metal anomalies, and microscopic details will absolutely change the way you look at pocket change, because coins are not just money, they are historical documents struck in metal. And sometimes those documents contain dramatic flaws that transform them into legends. To understand why a 2015 1-cent coin associated in popular discussion with Roosevelt Liberty imagery could even be mentioned in the same sentence as $7 million, we first have to understand how modern coins are supposed to be made and why errors are so rare in an age of advanced technology. Modern United States coins are produced by highly automated minting systems with multiple layers of inspection, digital dies, laser-engraved hubs, and strict quality control, meaning that most coins leave the mint nearly identical to one another, with weight tolerances measured in fractions of a gram and design details that are almost perfectly consistent. So when something goes wrong, it often happens at a microscopic level, but once in a very great while, a catastrophic chain of mistakes can occur, stacking one error on top of another, creating a coin that should never exist. In the case of the legendary 2015 1-cent Roosevelt Liberty era coin, the story usually begins with confusion and controversy, because traditionally Roosevelt appears on the dime, not the cent, yet collectors know that some of the most valuable era coins in history are off-metal strikes, wrong planchet errors, mule coins, and transitional errors where designs, metals, or denominations collide in ways that defy the mint's intentions. Imagine a scenario where a cent die, or a misidentified die hub bearing Roosevelt's portrait, is paired incorrectly during a test run, experimental strike, or die trial, and then struck onto an incorrect planchet, possibly one intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin, and then escapes the mint unnoticed. Such a coin would instantly become one of the rarest numismatic objects ever produced. Now consider the year 2015, a year when the U.S. Mint was deeply involved in ongoing research into metal compositions, cost-saving alloys, die longevity, and automated inspection systems, all of which increased the theoretical possibility, however remote, of experimental blanks, transitional metals, or rejected planchets being present in the minting environment. If a 1-cent coin from 2015 were struck on an experimental alloy containing traces of precious metals such as copper in unusual ratios, or even accidental contamination with silver, nickel, or manganese beyond standard tolerances, the intrinsic and historical value would skyrocket, especially if metallurgical testing confirmed it as a unique composition never officially released. But the true leap from thousands or hundreds of thousands into the multi-million-dollar realm requires more than a single error. It requires a perfect storm of mistakes. Collectors speculate that the hypothetical $7 million valuation attached to such a coin would only be justified if multiple extreme errors occurred simultaneously, such as a double or triple struck obverse and reverse with dramatic misalignment, a missing or distorted mint mark indicating a die stage never meant for circulation, a rotated die error of nearly 180 degrees, and a broad strike that allowed metal to flow beyond the collar, creating unusual shapes and distorted legends. Add to this the possibility of a mule error, where the obverse and reverse designs do not belong together at all, such as a Roosevelt obverse paired with a cent reverse, and you now have something that challenges the official mint record and forces historians to ask how such a coin could exist. The mint mark plays a critical role in this story, because missing mint marks, doubled mint marks, or mispunched mint marks have long been prized by collectors, but in the modern era, mint marks are integrated into the die rather than punched individually, making true mint mark errors extremely rare after the late 20th century. A 2015 1-cent coin showing a malformed, ghosted, or misplaced mint mark could indicate die damage, hub doubling, or even an unauthorized die modification, any of which would be a red flag for collectors and grading services. If such a mint mark error were combined with a wrong design strike, the coin would not only be rare, it would be essentially unique. Uniqueness is the ultimate driver of million-dollar prices in numismatics, because while rarity can be quantified, uniqueness creates competition among elite collectors and institutions, and when two or more parties want the same irreplaceable object, price becomes almost irrelevant. The idea of a $7 million 1-cent coin may sound absurd to non-collectors, but history shows that tiny denominations can command astronomical sums when the right factors align. Famous examples like the 1943 copper cent or the 1974 aluminum cent demonstrate that experimental or accidental issues can reach into the millions, not because of their metal content alone, but because of the story they tell about minting history and government experimentation. Applying this logic to a 2015 coin, one can imagine that if an experimental Roosevelt-designed cent were accidentally released during a trial phase and later officially denied or undocumented by the mint, its mystique would only grow stronger. Collectors would debate whether it was a fantasy piece, a pattern, or an illicit strike, and that debate itself would fuel demand, media attention, and speculative valuations. Error severity also matters greatly, because minor errors like off-center strikes or small die cracks are relatively common and usually worth modest premiums, but massive errors that render the coin visually shocking, such as extreme off-center strikes that still show full dates, or multiple overlapping impressions of the design, are far rarer. Imagine a 2015 cent where Roosevelt's portrait appears twice or three times, overlapping at different angles, with parts of the design missing entirely due to dye fill, grease, or foreign material between the die and planchet, creating ghostly outlines and blank areas that seem almost artistic. Such a coin would not only be valuable as an error but would appeal to collectors who appreciate the aesthetic impact of minting mistakes. The condition of the coin would also play a decisive role in pushing it into the multi-million-dollar category, because even the rarest error loses value if it is heavily worn or damaged after leaving the mint. A hypothetical $7 million 2015 error cent would almost certainly need to be in near mint or mint state condition, showing sharp details where present, original surfaces, and no signs of post-mint alteration, as any suspicion of tampering would immediately destroy its credibility. Authentication would be another crucial step, requiring analysis by top grading services, metallurgical labs, and independent experts who could confirm that the errors occurred during the minting process and not afterward. X-ray fluorescence testing, weight analysis, and microscopic examination would be used to determine whether the metal composition and strike characteristics match known minting parameters or deviate in ways that indicate experimental or accidental origins. The legend of a $7 million 1-cent coin also thrives on the human element, because many of the most famous error coins were discovered not by experts but by ordinary people checking their change, inheriting old collections, or stumbling upon unusual pieces by chance. This fuels the idea that somewhere out there, perhaps in a jar, drawer, or forgotten roll of pennies, a life-changing coin could be hiding, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. The psychological appeal of this possibility cannot be overstated, as it keeps collectors searching and talking, sharing photos online, debating authenticity, and speculating about values. In the case of the 2015 Roosevelt Liberty Cent story, much of the buzz comes from online discussions, videos, and forums where images of supposed error coins circulate, some genuine, some misidentified, and some outright fabrications, yet each image reignites the conversation and keeps the legend alive. It is important to understand that while $7 million valuations are often hypothetical or based on comparisons to other legendary coins, they serve as a symbol of the upper limit of what such an object could be worth if all conditions aligned perfectly. Coin collecting, a story that blurs the line between legend, possibility, and numismatic reality, the astonishing tale of the 1985 1-cent Roosevelt Liberty coin. A humble copper-colored penny that carries a face value of just 1 cent yet has been whispered about in collector circles as a coin that under extremely rare and specific circumstances could command a staggering value of up to $6.2 million, a figure so shocking that it immediately forces us to ask how a coin meant to buy. Almost nothing could ever be spoken of in the same breath as fine art masterpieces or rare historical treasures, and to understand this we must slow down, step back in time, and explore not only what this coin is supposed to be but what it could become when errors, mistakes, mint mark anomalies, metal composition surprises, and human oversight collide in just the right way, creating a perfect storm of rarity, mystery, and desire that drives collectors to the edge of reason, because the truth is, That value in coin collecting is not born from face value but from deviation, from what went wrong, from what should never have happened, and from what survived long enough to be discovered. And the 1985 1-cent Roosevelt Liberty coin sits at the crossroads of all these possibilities, beginning with its historical context, as 1985 was a year of massive production for United States 1-cent coins, with hundreds of millions struck to meet circulation demand, making the average 1985 penny one of the most common coins ever made. Yet within massive numbers lies opportunity for error, because high-speed minting, worn dies, overworked staff, experimental processes, and transitional periods in metal sourcing all increase the odds that something unusual slips through unnoticed. And this is where the story truly begins. Because the phrase Roosevelt Liberty attached to a 1-cent piece immediately suggests something out of the ordinary, since the traditional 1-cent design features Abraham Lincoln, while Franklin D. Roosevelt is famously associated with the dime, and that very contradiction opens the door to one of the most sensational hypothetical error scenarios in modern numismatics: the idea of a wrong design strike, a mule error, or a mismatched die pairing where a 1-cent planchet could theoretically receive an impression never intended for it. And while such errors are among the rarest and most valuable in existence, they are not purely imaginary, as documented mule coins exist across many denominations, proving that when dies are swapped, mislabeled, or accidentally installed, the impossible can happen. And if a genuine 1985 1-cent planchet were struck with Roosevelt dime design elements or a Liberty-style motif inconsistent with its denomination, the numismatic shockwave would be enormous, instantly placing such a coin among the rarest known United States errors. But design alone is only one part of the puzzle, because metal composition plays an equally critical role in turning a penny into a multimillion-dollar artifact, and by 1985 the United States Mint had officially transitioned the 1-cent coin to a primarily zinc core with a thin copper plating, moving away from the earlier solid copper alloy used for decades. Yet history shows us that transitional errors are some of the most valuable coins ever discovered, such as pennies struck on the wrong year's planchets or experimental metals never meant for circulation. And if a 1985 1-cent were somehow struck on a solid copper planchet from an earlier era, or even more dramatically on a silver, aluminum, or experimental alloy intended for another denomination or testing program, its value would instantly skyrocket, not because of speculation but because such a coin would represent a physical contradiction of official mint policy. A tangible mistake that proves something went wrong behind closed doors, and collectors pay extraordinary sums for proof that the system is not perfect. Because perfection is common while error is rare, and the more dramatic the error the higher the value climbs, especially when that error involves metal mismatches that can be scientifically verified through weight, density, and composition analysis. But the path to a $6.2 million valuation does not stop there, because mint mark anomalies add yet another layer of intrigue. As 1985 1-cent coins were produced at multiple mint facilities, most notably Philadelphia and Denver, with San Francisco producing proof versions, and mint marks are tiny details that carry enormous weight in the collector market, because a missing mint mark, a doubled mint mark, a misplaced mint mark, or a mint mark punched from the wrong year or denomination can transform an otherwise common coin into a one-of-a-kind specimen, and in rare cases mint marks have appeared where they should not exist at all, or in styles inconsistent with the era, suggesting the reuse of older punches or accidental installation of incorrect dies. And when such anomalies are paired with other errors such as off-metal strikes, wrong designs, or major die defects, the cumulative effect on value becomes exponential rather than additive, meaning the coin is not just rare but uniquely rare, a category so small it sometimes includes only one known example, and uniqueness is the ultimate driver of extreme prices. Because when two collectors want the same one-of-a-kind object, logic gives way to desire, ego, and legacy, especially when that object represents a story no other object can tell. And this brings us to die errors, one of the most fertile grounds for high-value discoveries, as dies are the tools that impart design onto blank planchets, and when those dies crack, chip, clash, double, or deteriorate, they leave permanent marks on every coin they strike until they are replaced. creating varieties that range from subtle to dramatic, and while minor doubling or small cracks are relatively common. Massive die breaks, full-face doubling, rotated dies, and extreme misalignments are rare, especially when combined with other errors, and a 1985 1-cent Roosevelt Liberty coin exhibiting a dramatic double strike, where the coin is struck twice at different angles, or a blockage error where one coin impresses its image onto another, or a strike-through error where grease, cloth, or debris partially blocks the die, creating ghostly missing details, would already command significant value. But when such die errors coexist with wrong metal composition or wrong design elements, the resulting coin becomes something collectors may never see again in their lifetime. And this is where the possibility of a multi-million-dollar valuation begins to feel less like fantasy and more like an extreme but conceivable outcome. Because the coin is no longer judged by price guides or typical auction records, but by private negotiation among elite collectors and institutions who understand that ownership of such a piece grants not only prestige but control over a narrative that defines an era of minting history. And beyond the mechanical aspects of errors lies the human element, because mistakes are made by people, and in the mid-1980s the United States Mint was operating under intense production pressure, modernizing equipment, testing new materials, and pushing output to meet economic demand. A combination that historically correlates with increased error rates, and while most errors are caught and destroyed, some inevitably escape, especially when they are subtle enough to pass initial inspection but dramatic enough to reveal themselves later under magnification or testing, and this delay between creation and discovery adds another layer of mystique, because coins that surface decades later carry the romance of hidden treasure, of something overlooked by millions until the right eyes recognized its significance. And the longer a coin remains undiscovered, the more speculation builds around how many might exist, and when research suggests that only one has ever been found, value skyrockets accordingly, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying certainty and rarity, and this certainty is reinforced through professional grading and authentication, where third-party grading services analyze weight, diameter, composition, strike characteristics, and die markers to confirm that a coin is genuine and not the product of alteration or forgery. And once a coin receives official recognition as a legitimate mint error of extreme rarity, its status changes forever, entering reference books, auction catalogs, and the collective consciousness of the numismatic world. And this recognition is often the moment when prices leap from thousands to millions, because institutional buyers such as museums, investment funds, and high net worth collectors gain confidence that the coin's story will endure. And in the case of a 1985 1-cent Roosevelt Liberty coin, hypothetically combining wrong design elements, off-metal composition, major die errors, and mint mark anomalies, that story would be unlike anything else in United States coinage, making the coin not just valuable but historically disruptive. Because today we are talking about a humble 1-cent coin dated 1993 with a D mint mark, often referred to by enthusiasts as the 1993 D Roosevelt Liberty 1 cent, a name that itself sparks debate and curiosity, and in this video we are exploring why this ordinary-looking penny, with a face value of just 1 cent, has been rumored, discussed, and passionately argued to be worth as much as $9.5 million under extremely rare and extraordinary circumstances due to a perfect storm of mint errors, mistakes, mint mark anomalies, and striking irregularities that transform it from pocket change into a potential once-in-a-lifetime discovery. So settle in, because this is a deep journey into how a tiny copper coin can tell a massive story about history, human error, and unbelievable value. The 1993 D 1-cent coin was produced during a time when the United States Mint was striking billions of pennies each year, primarily featuring the familiar Lincoln design that had been in use for decades. Yet among these billions, collectors believe that a microscopic number of coins escaped the minting process with combinations of errors so extreme and so unique that they defy normal valuation methods. And this is where the legend of the ultra-valuable 1993 D Roosevelt Liberty 1 cent begins. Because despite the confusion in naming, the fascination centers on error coins that appear to blur design standards, mix elements that should never coexist, and show signs of minting chaos that should not have passed inspection, making them the ultimate targets for elite collectors. To understand why such a coin could ever be discussed in the same breath as multi-million-dollar values, we must first understand how era coins gain worth, because in numismatics, value is not just about age or metal content, but about rarity, story, condition, and the impossibility of repetition, and the 1993 D penny sits at a crossroads of all these factors when the right errors are present. During 1993, the Denver Mint was producing cents using copper-plated zinc planchets, a change that had already been implemented years earlier to reduce costs, and this process itself introduced vulnerabilities, because thin copper plating over zinc cores made coins more susceptible to plating errors, exposed cores, bubbling, peeling, and incomplete bonding. And while minor examples of these flaws are common and relatively low in value, extreme cases where the plating fails catastrophically or interacts with other striking errors become exponentially rarer. One of the most talked about possibilities for the 1993 D coin involves a dramatic off-metal error, where a cent is struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin, and if such a coin also bears a Denver Mint mark and the correct date, while displaying mismatched size, weight, and composition, its value instantly leaps into a different universe. Because off-metal errors require multiple failures across different stages of the minting process, making them extraordinarily difficult to replicate. Another factor that fuels the $9.5 million speculation is the possibility of a transitional error combined with a mule error, meaning the obverse and reverse designs come from incompatible dies or time periods, such as a cent obverse paired with a design element or legend that does not belong to any officially released coin of that year. And while confirmed mules are already among the most valuable errors in existence, a previously unknown mule involving a 1993 D cent would represent a discovery so important that museums and private collectors would compete aggressively to acquire it. The mint mark itself plays a critical role in this story, because the D mint mark signifies production at the Denver Mint, and mint mark errors are among the most dramatic and controversial in U.S. coinage, including repunched mint marks, doubled mint marks, misplaced mint marks, and even mint marks appearing where they should not exist at all. And if a 1993 D cent were found with a mint mark style inconsistent with that year, or positioned in an impossible location, or showing signs of being hand-punched rather than hubbed, it would raise immediate red flags and intense scrutiny. Some theories suggest the existence of a micro D or oversized D mint mark anomaly on a small batch of 1993 cents, possibly resulting from experimental dies or repairs. And while such claims remain unverified publicly, the mere possibility keeps collectors searching rolls and collections decades later. Die errors also play a massive role in the potential value explosion of a 1993 D cent, because doubled dies, especially strong Class 1 or Class 2 doubled dies, can multiply a coin's value dramatically, and if a 1993 D cent exhibited extreme doubling on the date, mint mark, or inscriptions, combined with other errors like die rotation or die clash remnants, it would become a textbook example of compounded rarity. Imagine a coin where the word Liberty is visibly doubled, the date shows clear separation, the mint mark appears doubled or misplaced, and the reverse exhibits ghostly outlines of Lincoln's profile due to a violent die clash, all on a coin that somehow escaped destruction. Such a piece would not just be rare, it would be unique. Uniqueness is the holy grail of coin collecting, because while rarity can sometimes be quantified, uniqueness cannot, and a truly unique coin commands whatever price the highest bidder is willing to pay, which is how theoretical values like $9.5 million enter the conversation, not as guaranteed prices, but as expressions of potential in a market driven by passion and prestige. Another possibility that adds fuel to the fire is the existence of a wrong date error, where a die intended for a different year is mistakenly used, creating a coin with mismatched design elements that do not align with official records. And if a 1993 D cent were struck using a die with features from another year, especially one known for rarity or historical significance, the resulting hybrid could rewrite sections of mint history. The condition of the coin also matters immensely, because era coins that survive in pristine or near perfect condition are far rarer than those found heavily circulated, and a mint state example with full original luster, sharp details, and no post-mint damage would exponentially increase desirability. Professional grading and authentication would be essential, as no serious collector would consider such a valuation without certification from a respected grading service, and the discovery of a previously unknown error would trigger extensive research, documentation, and publication within the numismatic community. The story aspect cannot be overstated, because collectors do not just buy metal, they buy stories, and a 1993 D1 cent with an unprecedented combination of errors would carry a narrative of human oversight, mechanical failure, and historical accident that cannot be manufactured again. Some enthusiasts even speculate about experimental strikes, test dies, or unauthorized strikes that may have occurred during periods of equipment adjustment or die testing, and while these ideas remain speculative, history has shown that experimental coins do occasionally surface decades later, shocking the collecting world and redefining what was thought possible. The mention of Roosevelt in connection with a cent often sparks confusion, because Roosevelt traditionally appears on the dime, yet this confusion itself reflects how easily misinformation, mislabeling, or misunderstanding can surround rare coins, and how important careful analysis becomes when evaluating extraordinary claims, because sometimes a coin's legend grows from misunderstanding, while other times it grows from genuine mystery. The market psychology behind million-dollar coins is another critical piece of the puzzle, because ultra-wealthy collectors often seek pieces that no one else can own, using coins as symbols of status, legacy, and intellectual conquest, and when two or more such collectors desire the same unique object, prices can escalate beyond conventional logic. Auction records show that coins once thought impossible to value have shattered expectations, proving that under the right conditions, even a penny can become priceless. The 1993 D-cent exists at the intersection of modern minting, widespread circulation, and advanced error detection, making it a perfect candidate for the discovery of something extraordinary. Because billions of eyes have handled these coins, yet new varieties are still being found, reminding us that the story of coinage is never truly finished. Even if only one such coin exists, hidden in a jar, drawer, or forgotten collection, its discovery would electrify the numismatic world and validate decades of searching by roll hunters and collectors who believe that treasure still hides in plain sight. Ultimately, the idea of a $9.5 million 1993 D1 cent is less about a guaranteed price and more about the convergence of rarity, error complexity, historical significance, and human fascination with the extraordinary.